guys, it's Ellie here, and I had some more thoughts that I thought I would share with you guys today. Just the other day, my husband and I were actually talking about this, how there seems to be a lot of loneliness and people feeling isolated and just with no community or little community. And we were talking about this and we were just wondering what's going on, what's causing this, because not that it's a new problem, but it definitely seems to be maybe more prevalent in today's society. And so there was really three things that we kind of were talking about, as what's causing this loneliness epidemic, if you want to call it that. um, which the very first thing I think is maybe a little obvious, but it is social media. We were talking about how so many people, when you look on the streets when you're walking or even when you're driving, so many people are on their phones and they're texting, they're on social media, they're playing games, and they're not making eye contact with people, or they're not talking to the ones that are around them. They're on their phones, they're connected to their phones, which I don't blame them, because I struggle with that too, because phones are addicting. Social media was made to really highlight like the same centers in our brain that like an addiction can stem from. So you get huge amounts of like dopamine from scrolling and trying to find something new, or you get excited when you hear like a ping from your phone. So social media really it's helped a little bit. It's helped us stay connected, maybe with those that are far away. um, but it really has disconnected to those us, or it has disconnected us to those who are close. And so, I mean, I just don't understand. Just well, let me go back. I do understand why people are so lonely with social media and being on phones, and there's no real connection on social media. It is a fake connection. People only post about, their good things that happen, and you just read it and you like it, instead of maybe calling that person or writing them a letter and talking through the thing that they're posting, right? We're not really going to that person and talking to them about their daily life. We're looking on a screen and looking to see their daily life on a screen instead of actually going to that person. And so I know it's not everybody's doing that, but social media makes it a lot easier to not go and talk to people. It's a lot easier and convenient, and it fits in with our busy schedules to just, look on a screen and see what people are up to. And the second thing that we were talking about that I think is causing a lot of loneliness is our culture is a culture of like consumption, right? Always working hard to buy the next thing, or always doing what's best for yourself, or making sure that you're feeding yourself, or you're putting the mask on yourself before, or like that airplane analogy, where if like you're in a crash, it says to like put your mask on before you help anyone else, otherwise you can't help other people. Which I think that analogy is good for an airplane, but I don't know if it's necessarily good for life, because that's really in an emergency context, and in life we're not always going through emergencies. And so why would you always be focused on yourself? It's going to be a lot harder to take your eyes off of yourself and actually look to other people when you're always focused on yourself. And so I think because we're such a culture of consumption, and we're a culture of giving me what I want, we're focused on ourselves. And when you're focused on yourself, you really can't build that good of a community, right? Because in order to build friendship and to build a community, you have to go out there and not focus on yourself, because people are selfish. And if you want to make friends, you're going to have to look outside of yourself and go help someone else or be meaningful to someone else. And so our culture has just gotten so wrapped up in what I want and what I feel and what I think is necessary. Well, of course you're lonely because you're only thinking about your. Oop, I bumped my mic there. Sorry. I said, of course you're lonely. You're only thinking about yourself. And so it's going to be very hard to make friends and to have deep connections when you're not thinking about the needs of other people, right? And I struggle with this too. It's very easy to only think of yourself. In fact, it's not only easy, it's natural. All of us want to put ourselves first for the most part. But if you want true deep relationships, you have to be willing to sacrifice. And in turn, hopefully that person would sacrifice for you, and then you start to build community and good relationships, just like in a family, right? We're already closer to our family members if you have a healthy family, because you're kind of willing to put up more with your family. But when it comes to friends or meeting strangers, you're not willing to really put up with much. And so it can be hard to start friendships, at least, because you can start to see the flaws in people and you can be like, oh, I don't really want to be near them because that's not going to benefit me. But if you were to treat them like family, you would be willing to put up with some of those things that might be a little annoying. Definitely don't want to put up with like toxic behavior or hurting behavioral. But if someone just talks a whole lot and they just don't stop, that's something that you can put up with for the sake of the relationship. Um, so social media, I think, just over consuming, and from that consumption mindset that comes an inward focus. Um, and then another thing that we were talking about was just how like populated we are, like especially people in big cities or even the suburbs are very populated, and just how there's so many people around us, and yet I can't say don't. We rarely try to get to know people. But I think part of that is that it's very overwhelming and very intimidating because that's a lot of people. Like, I don't know if we were necessarily meant to belong in such huge, huge swaths of people, right? We're just, I don't know, there's just so many people around us. Think about like an apartment complex, right? We're an apartment complex right now, or condos, or whatever you want to call them, and we don't really know our neighbors. Now that's our own fault. Like, we could very easily go and talk to our neighbors, but we don't want to bother them, or which neighbor do we start with, because there's so many of them. So it's funny how we all live in these very tight, small communities, especially if you're in, an apartment complex or a condo, or if you're in a city and you see people all of the time, but we're not making those close knit connections that we as humans need. And another thing I think that it just came to my mind as I was talking, another thing that I think that makes us so lonely is that we've been taught, or we pride ourselves here in America to be independent. And we're so independent that we're moving away from our families, and we're moving far away for a job so that we can discover ourselves or travel, which nothing wrong with traveling. But I don't see our families like sticking close together. Like my grandparents' generation, like it was normal for them to try to live by each other because family was important, and that was your main community, your main support system, especially in other cultures like the Latino culture, and I'm sure many other ones where a lot of families actually live together in the same house, like multi-generational families. And so they still have held that regard of family at a high standard, if that's how you want to say it, high standard. No, they those cultures, hold family in a high regard. so they try to stay together because you have your family around you, you have your support system around you, and not every family is going to be healthy. So there are some things there that can cause you to have to not be as close to family. But I would say for the majority, most families aren't very, very abusive to where you can't live near your family. And so that causes us to be lonely. We don't have our families around us. We're being independent and walking away and doing our own thing at the cost of, honestly, our mental health and feeling alone. And so there's a scripture verse that I wanted to read here. It's actually behind me. Ecclesiastes 4:12. It says that. Let me read this real quick down here. But I'm actually going to start in verse 9. So it says in 4 verse 9, two are better than one because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another one to lift him up. Again, if two lie together, they keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? And though a man might prevail against one who is alone, two will withstand him. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. So that's basically what this thing is, this cord behind me. It's a rope of three. And we use that in our marriage or we use it at our wedding because it basically shows like my husband and I in Christ together, a threefold cord is a lot stronger and a lot harder to break than just two, and let alone just one. One is easy to break, two, not so much, but three is a lot harder. And so the Bible does talk a lot about community and how important it is to have a community. And so I would encourage you to get involved in some sort of community. Of course, I would say church community, make relationships there. Remember that the church is not perfect. You're going to find a lot of imperfect people in the church, and you just have to be willing to put up with some of their faults, just as the other person is going to be putting up with some of your faults. So, with that being said, I hope that encouraged someone or maybe gave you something to think about, especially if you're feeling alone. And I hope that you one day can have lots of friends or maybe reconnect with family to where you're not feeling so alone. So I hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.